So how does Canada's federal budget impact home buyers and sellers? That's the topic of today's video. My name is John Pasalis, president at Real Law City Realty. You can catch all my latest writings on Toronto's housing market at movesmartly.com. If you find this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date on all my latest videos. So the federal government released their budget this week, and it was long awaited. We were wondering to see if they were going to release any policies that would cool Canada's housing market. There were a lot of calls from bank economists for the federal government to do something to cool the housing market. And what we saw is a budget that actually had very little to do with the resale housing market. The only policy the federal government actually introduced was a foreign buyer tax that would effectively be a 1% tax on any homes owned by non-residents that are not being rented out. So this is a tax that's going to have very little impact on Toronto's housing market and Canada's housing market in general, because the share of properties owned by non-residents or foreign buyers that are sitting empty is quite small. So this is really not going to do anything to move the needle. And what we ended up finding is, again, the government didn't do anything to cool this market. Now, there is some method and some rationale to what seems like a crazy decision. As I mentioned in my April report, we couldn't expect the federal government to do much to cool the market. At the end of the day, cooling the market is really trying to pull back the demand in the market. And the big sort of segment of demand is actually from home buyers. So any policies that would make it harder for home buyers to jump into the market certainly wouldn't have been popular. I was hoping to look at policies that sort of eventually make it harder for investors to get into the market, to make it a little bit more competitive for home buyers. We did not see that. Who knows if they'll do that in the future, but certainly not in the short term. Now, I think the big takeaway right now is that for people who are actively looking at buying homes or recently bought homes, this really just signals that we're not going to see any government-induced sort of rapid cool down in the housing market, which is something that we saw in 2017 when the provincial government introduced a foreign buyer tax. It shocked the market and prices basically fell 20% overnight. So while this is not good news for people looking for a more affordable housing market, I think it does give current home buyers and recent home buyers a little bit of confidence, at least over the next 6 to 12 months, that we should see some stability in home prices without any kind of government measures trying to cool it down. So overall, I don't think it's the best decision from policymakers, but certainly understandable that they don't really want to drop the hammer and put too much pressure on the market, because again, that's going to put pressure on first-time buyers who are trying to get into this market. Now, again, one of the things I wanted to touch on, we've had people ask me about, is this idea about buying into, what everyone now is calling a housing bubble. And I think that's one thing I'm going to do a future video on, but I'll touch on it right now. And it's this idea that I think a lot of people, when they hear bubble, they panic. When I talk about it, it's more to just to highlight that we're in a market where we need to just be more aware of the risks. And the reality is, asset bubbles can go on for some time. It doesn't mean they're gonna crash overnight. And right now, we're probably in the period where we're seeing stability in the housing market. At the end of the day, the housing market is still very hot. So, prices are up 32% year over year in Canada. They're probably up in the 20% range in the GTA. So, it's a long way from going up 20% to negative. And I think we have a long road ahead of us before we start to see sort of a negative return in prices. We're probably going to see the acceleration cool down over the next probably 12 months. But we're probably going to see some stability in prices over that time. So if I'm a first-time buyer, I don't know if I'd be panicking about prices crashing in the next month or so. But again, keeping in mind that we are in a more vulnerable market when we see prices rise as rapidly, means we're going to need to keep a closer eye on the trends and any signals that we're going to see, turning points in the future. And that's something I'm going to try to talk about in future videos in terms of how we think about analyzing some of these more dynamic and high frequency trends, especially when we're looking at different segments of the market. I'll try to touch on in an upcoming video. If you have any questions about the latest budget, please post your comments below or shoot me an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com.